Forget the tanks and fighter planes. World War II was powered by 7 steel monsters most people have never even heard of. These trucks didn't just survive the war, they carried it on their backs. And without them, history would look very, very different. You need to see them for yourself. 1. GMC CCKW Deuce and a Half, the truck that won the war. If World War II had an MVP award, the GMC CCKW would win it without even bothering to attend the ceremony. This thing wasn't fast, it wasn't glamorous, and it definitely wasn't comfortable, but it moved absolutely everything. Fuel, ammo, rations, troops, even the guy who always forgot his helmet. Over 500,000 rolled out, which means if you threw a stone in 1944, you'd probably hit one. What made the Deuce and a Half so loved by soldiers was simple. It worked. Every time. Rain, snow, mud, Normandy hedgerows, Italian mountains, you name it, the CCKW grumbled a bit and then kept going. And because the US Army didn't believe in light packing, these trucks were constantly overloaded. Did they complain? Probably. Did they break? Hardly. Its biggest claim to fame was the Red Ball Express, a round-the-clock convoy system that fed Patton's tanks as they raced across France. Drivers were mostly inexperienced, sleep-deprived, and running at full throttle, but the CCKWs held the entire operation together. Not bad for a truck that topped out at 45 miles per hour on a good day. In the end, the CCKW became more than a truck. It became the backbone of Allied mobility. It wasn't heroic in the Hollywood way, but it did the gritty, unglamorous jobs that actually win wars. Think of it as the world's toughest delivery driver, just with shells and gasoline instead of Amazon packages. If this surprised you, hit subscribe and drop a like. There are even crazier World War II machines coming up, and you don't want to miss them. 2. Studebaker US-6, the Lend-Lease legend. If the GMC was America's workhorse, the Studebaker US-6 was the world's favorite foster child. The US built it, the Soviets adopted it, and together they turned it into one of the most important trucks on the Eastern Front. In fact, Russian soldiers loved it so much that many believed it was specifically designed for Soviet mud, which is basically the highest compliment you can give a truck. The US-6 wasn't flashy, but it had a secret weapon: absurd reliability. Whether it was dragging supplies over frozen rivers or crawling up snow-choked roads, the Studebaker just kept moving. Soviet mechanics praised its simple design, roomy cab, and the fact that starting it didn't require a full engineering degree and a prayer. Of course, its biggest moment of fame came when the Red Army bolted Katyusha rocket launchers onto the back. Suddenly, this humble American truck went from delivery boy to mobile thunderstorm, capable of flattening entire positions in seconds. Imagine being a quiet cargo truck one week and a heavy metal rock star the next. That was the Studebaker US-6. By the end of the war, tens of thousands were in Soviet service, hauling everything from bread to artillery. Many soldiers said the Studebaker was one of the best things America ever sent them. Not bad for a truck that technically wasn't even built for them in the first place. 3. Opel Blitz, Germany's relentless workhorse. If you picture any German convoy during World War II, chances are an Opel Blitz is somewhere in the frame. This truck wasn't just common, it was everywhere. It hauled troops, ammunition, spare parts, wounded soldiers, barrels of fuel, and occasionally a German officer who insisted he knew a shortcut. The Blitz earned its reputation because it was reliable, quick for its time, and simple enough to maintain even when spare parts were running thin. In the early years of the war, Germany moved at terrifying speed, and the Opel Blitz was the logistical engine pushing it all forward. Without it, Blitzkrieg would have been brisk Walkkrieg at best. But the war eventually turned, and the Blitz had to battle terrain Germany wasn't ready for, specifically the brutal Eastern Front. Mud, snow, freezing temperatures, and general bad vibes pushed the truck to its limits. Many Blitzes simply froze to the ground, which the Soviet soldiers found hilarious. German mechanics did not. Still, despite shortages and conditions that would make any truck beg for retirement, the Opel Blitz kept going. It wasn't mythical or flashy, but it was dependable, like that friend who always shows up to help you move furniture. It became one of the most recognizable machines of the entire war, and even after 1945, thousands kept running across Europe. 4. ZIS-5, the Soviet truck that refused to die. If the Soviet Union had built a truck version of a brick, it would have been the ZIS-5. This thing was so rugged, so stubborn, and so resistant to abuse that Soviet mechanics joked it could run on fuel, water, or pure communist determination. And honestly, they weren't far off. Designed in the 1930s and built in massive numbers, the ZIS-5 carried the Red Army through the darkest years of the war. The brilliance of the ZIS-5 was its simplicity. No fancy parts, no delicate components, nothing requiring a German engineer and a magnifying glass to repair. If something broke, a soldier could usually fix it with a hammer, some wire, and whatever optimism he had left. In fact, the truck was intentionally stripped down during wartime production. Wooden doors, basic headlights, minimal metalwork. It looked like a truck drawn by someone who had only heard about trucks secondhand. But it worked. On the front lines, the ZIS-5 hauled everything. Troops, ammo, bread, machine guns, barrels, even entire anti-aircraft guns. There are photos of ZIS-5s dragging artillery through mud so deep it looked like the earth itself was trying to swallow them. And yet, they kept moving. Soviet drivers often said, "If the ZIS-5 can't get there, nothing can." It even earned a legendary role in the Battle of Moscow and Stalingrad, where thousands worked around the clock to bring supplies through snowstorms and bombardment. These trucks were not comfortable and barely safe, but they were alive in the way only Soviet machinery could be, refusing to quit, refusing to freeze, and refusing to accept the idea of slowing down. The ZIS-5 wasn't pretty, but it became the loyal pack mule of the Eastern Front, tough, ugly, but absolutely essential. 5. Bedford QL, Britain's underrated battlefield hero. The Bedford QL is one of those trucks that never gets the spotlight, mostly because Britain was busy talking about Spitfires, Churchills, and anything else with a cannon strapped to it. But behind the scenes, the QL was dragging the entire British Army up and down continents like a determined older sibling doing everyone's homework. Over 50,000 were built, and they served in North Africa, Italy, Northwest Europe, and with Commonwealth troops across the globe. The charm of the Bedford QL was that it was a proper British machine. Polite, practical, and quietly brilliant. It wasn't the fastest, but it was incredibly reliable. It didn't complain, didn't break down often, and didn't throw a tantrum when you overloaded it, which, let's be honest, soldiers did constantly. The QL became the backbone of British logistics simply because it never made a fuss. Very British of it. It also came in a ridiculous number of variants: radio trucks, fuel tankers, fire engines, troop carriers, and even mobile workshops. If the British Army needed something moved, fixed, or carried, the QL happily stepped forward like, "Right then, I suppose I'll do it." And it did, exceptionally well. In the brutal desert heat of North Africa, the QL earned a reputation for refusing to overheat even when its drivers nearly did. In the mud of Italy and Normandy, it kept grinding forward when lighter vehicles surrendered. Mechanics loved it, commanders trusted it, and soldiers respected it. 3 things that rarely happen at the same time. The Bedford QL may not be as famous as its American or Soviet counterparts, but ask any British veteran and they'll tell you. The QL was the quiet hero that kept the whole war effort running. 6. Chevrolet G506, America's forgotten backbone. The Chevrolet G506 is one of those World War II trucks that did absolutely everything, yet somehow never gets the credit. It's like the reliable friend who shows up early, carries the heavy boxes, pays for snacks, and then quietly leaves before the group photo. Over 150,000 were built, and they served everywhere from the Pacific jungles to the frozen Arctic convoys, yet most people today barely remember its name. What made the G506 special was its combination of toughness and versatility. It was smaller than the big GMC CCKW, which meant it could squeeze into tight forest trails, winding mountain roads, and muddy paths where bigger trucks got stuck and pretended the problem was strategic repositioning. And because it was 4x4, it handled rough terrain better than many heavier vehicles. Soldiers quickly realized this truck could go almost anywhere, as long as you didn't ask it to go fast. The G506 also came in a hilarious number of versions: cargo, dump truck, ambulance, telephone line-laying truck, bomb service truck, maintenance workshop, you name it. If the US Army needed a tool for a job, Chevy would just shrug and say, "Sure, we've got a G506 for that." It also played a huge role in Lend-Lease. Thousands ended up in Soviet service, where drivers praised its smooth ride and robust drivetrain. In fact, Soviet mechanics considered it one of the easiest American trucks to maintain, high praise from people who routinely fixed vehicles using hammers and determination. The G506 never became a star, but it didn't need to. It worked in the shadows, hauling supplies, towing equipment, and keeping armies alive. Quiet, sturdy, and always ready, the G506 was one of the unsung heroes that helped push the Allies to victory. 7. Fiat 626. Italy's tough little workhorse. If the American trucks were muscular and the Soviet trucks were stubborn, the Fiat 626 was the scrappy underdog that refused to be ignored. Built for the Italian army before and during World War II, the 626 wasn't the biggest or the strongest, but it was surprisingly capable, like a medium-sized dog that thinks it's a wolf. It served in North Africa, the Balkans, and even on the Eastern Front alongside German units. The Fiat 626 had one major strength. It was exceptionally maneuverable. Narrow roads in Italian villages? No problem. Tight mountain passes? Easy. Sand dunes? Well, it tried. But to the Italian army's credit, the 626 handled desert conditions better than many expected. With a reliable inline-six engine and decent suspension, it became a favorite among drivers who didn't want their kidneys shaken loose. When Italy switched sides in 1943, thousands of 620 SIXS were captured by Germany. The Wehrmacht happily reused them, which tells you everything you need to know. German forces did not keep junk. If they repurposed a vehicle, it meant the thing had real value. And the 626 did, light enough for quick deployments, strong enough to haul gear, and simple enough to repair even when spare parts were a dream and fuel was a rumor. The 626 never achieved fame, but it played its role with determination. It moved troops, ammunition, medical equipment, food, and occasionally a commander who insisted on sitting in the front because the view is better. In the end, the Fiat 626 proved that you don't have to be huge to make history. Sometimes, being dependable and showing up every day is enough to earn your place among WWII's steel legends. These steel giants didn't get medals, but they kept entire armies alive. If you love this dive into forgotten World War II machines, hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell me which wartime vehicle you want next. Your suggestion might be the next deep dive.